Hi, I'm Don Helgeson. Welcome to another edition of PC Warrior, almost live. Today's guest is joining us from Tennessee. Ken McGhee joined the tribe 5 months ago and recently indicated that he wanted to share his story. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Here we go, everyone. Hi everyone, I'm Don Helgeson, coming to you from Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada. This is PC Warrior Almost Live from the Mohawk Mission and the PC Tribe. Today I have a special guest coming to us from Tennessee, Ken McGhee. Ken contacted me a couple of weeks ago and indicated they'd be willing to share his story. We've just been chatting for a few minutes here. He sent me his bio about a week ago, and I'm telling you, this guy has an incredible story to tell. Ken is grew up in Nashville, from what I understand, and still currently lives in Tennessee. And he joined the tribe about 5 months ago. And as I said earlier, he contacted me and said he'd like to share the story. And he's got some real unique parts about his story that I want everyone to take a good listen to. I think we'll learn an awful lot from it. So without further ado, Ken, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us your prostate story.
Well, as you said, I grew up in Nashville before it became the Nashville we know today. I've continually moved to smaller and smaller communities. And so I currently work for a bank and manage the branch here locally, and been married for 30 something years. I've got two kids, 3 grandchildren, and been disgustingly healthy all my life. I've never had any kind of surgical procedure until January of 2020, and had to have some meniscus repairs done on my knee. And I thought, well, that's all right. It's been almost 60 years. And as I went into 2021, and I think I shared with you in September of 2020, my wife and I had gone to the beach, and we were staying at our favorite condominium down there on Perdido Key, and Hurricane Sally was out in the Gulf, and everybody's talking, oh, it's going in the other side of New Orleans, it's going in Mobile, and all this stuff was 100, 200 miles away. And even that night, about 6 o'clock, they were saying it was going in around Mobile, which is 100 miles away. So we were seeing some stiff winds, but it wasn't terrible. About 8, they said, oh, it's turned, and it's going to come in over Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, Perdido Key area. So by that time where we were, there's some big tall bridges, and they closed the bridges because the winds were already up to 80, 90 miles an hour. You couldn't get out. And so we rode through the eye of a hurricane. And I thought that was about the worst thing I'd probably ever have to do in my life. A year later, I'm sitting in my urologist office and waiting for him to come in and give me some news that I knew wasn't going to be good, but I really wasn't prepared for what he was going to tell me. And so the previous November, I had been to my primary care and got my blood work done. I've been dealing with high blood pressure and diabetes 2s for about 5 years. And so that was really why I was going to the primary care, but they did do a PSA while I was there, and it came back at 4.5. And there was, a comment, or, you might want to check that. We might, do some medication, see if it's just an infection, or it wasn't a whole lot made of it. And I didn't do any of it at the time because it just didn't seem like that big a deal. I kind of knew what a PSA was. I knew it had to do with the prostate, but that was about it. In May, I switched primary care, and we looked at my numbers, and he took my labs from the previous time. And so we did some things to tweak my blood pressure medicine and discuss some things I needed to do to lower my A1C and without adding any medications, and scheduled for me to come back in August. And I did. And at that time, he did a whole new set of blood work. And my blood pressure was doing really good. I just enrolled in a program offered through work to bring my A1C down, and he got to my PSA test and it was 35.
Okay.
Um, and so he was like, that's not good. That's a problem. Uh, so I'd been having some urination issues and things. And so he had given me some antibiotics back in May to see if that would help. And it seemed like the symptoms had subsided a little bit. So I wasn't getting up as much at night. But then when the PSA came back, he said, we're scheduling you for a visit with a urologist. So they had one. It's a kind of a community hospital, but it's a regional community hospital in Murray, Kentucky. There's a university there. So it's a little probably more than just a community hospital. So anyway, I was walking out to the car and my phone was ringing, and it's the urologist office.
Yeah.
And they're going, if you can stick around, we can get you in this afternoon.
Okay.
So I saw the nurse practitioner. She did a DRE and felt some firmness, but they put me on some more, did the antibiotic thing for 2 more weeks, scheduled me to come back to see the urologist, and came back. They did another set of blood work. PSA was up to like 43, and he did a DRE, and he'd kind of been going, yeah, we're going to check it and look at it, and he was like real optimistic. And when he did the DRE, and it's like, we're scheduling you for a biopsy next week, and he said, because I'm going to be on vacation the week after, and we're not going to wait. And so I had the biopsy on the 13th, actually, 1 year today.
Well, happy anniversary.
Yeah. Hey, it was he's a little old school. He puts you under and does all that. And so.
Well, you're lucky. I wasn't under.
Yeah. The anesthesiologist, like, here's the little hammer, here's the big hammer. So it didn't bother me a bit. And I didn't have any problems with that. So the 23rd, so 10 days later, I'm sitting in his office, waiting to hear. And my wife and I were there, and we're looking at our phones, and I get notification that one of my friends here, his son had just passed away from COVID. And I get another notification that a guy I went to college with had just died of lung cancer. And I'm just thinking, I'm getting all these, and I'm sitting here, and I knew what the numbers, were not good. Yeah. And he comes in and he says, everything tested for positive for cancer. He said he took 18 cores. Okay. And they were all 50% or better, and it graded out a Gleason 9. And even though we hadn't even got this far, he was just kind of like, it's spread. He said, you're not a candidate for surgery. Okay. And he set me up with the urologist, the oncologist there. And of course, then we got the scans, and it showed a spot on my tailbone. CT scans came back clear, but it showed a spot on a rib too. So went back to the oncologist, and we looked at the scans. He said, man, he said, there are some small spots. It wasn't a big widespread, big tumors. He said, I really want you to go down to Vanderbilt in Nashville. He said, they've got a new scan that just gotten approved, which is the PSMA scan. Yeah. And we want you to do that. He said, it'll really help us decide what our treatment plan is going to be. So I went down there, saw the oncologist down there, and she was like, well, wait a minute, let me see if I can get you in to see my radiologist this afternoon. I'm just like, it blew me away, So yeah, a couple of hours later, we're sitting in the office with the radiologist. He's looking at the scans and everything that my oncologist from Murray had sent down. And he said, yeah, we need to do a PSMA scan. And so they got me scheduled for that. It did take about 6 weeks to do that. Meantime, back in October, on the day that my urologist sent me to the oncologist, he prescribed me the biclutamide and then had me back in 2 weeks for the Lupron shot. And everybody's going, we're getting, you got time. We don't have to rush.
Yeah.
We're doing these things that are good. And so it ended up, the scan came back and it ruled out the spot on the rib, but it showed 2 spots on the tailbone and multiple lymph nodes that weren't picked up on the CT scans. So everybody was kind of in agreement that we needed to go the radiation route instead of full-on chemo. And so I did, starting in January of the 17th, I started 26 days of IMRT, and they did the prostate, they did the lymph nodes, the ones that showed cancer, the ones that didn't show cancer, and then they did the spots on the bones. So they radiated everything. Got off of that in February. March, I started the Xtandi on top of the Lupron, and my PSA has come down. It's it had gone to, by the time I went to in October, 2 or 3 weeks after they started me on the Xtandi, and at the Lupron and the biclutamide, which I only did 4 weeks of, it was down to 3.8.
Okay.
So it fell off a cliff. By the time I got done with the radiation, it was 0.3. And so now it's currently, the last 3 or 4 I've had have been less than 0.1. So everybody's happy with that. And so now I'm just kind of in that cruise mode of taking my medicine, and but I'm living with it. And, then we see where it goes from there. And that's kind of what's got me here today. And in all of that, I'm trying to learn stuff, and that's how I came on the tribe. I was doing different forums and looking at different things, and that's how I ended up on the PC tribe. So part of the story of that, though, is, and one of the things that resonates so much with me about Tracy's, his vision and his mission to raise awareness, is because, my wife worked in the medical field for 10 years. Yeah. We're not medically ignorant, and she's pretty sharp on all this stuff, but I still miss. So I had some blood work done, and I had to sign up to get on their portal, and so it was the same lab that had been doing my blood work back to 2016. Well, I found they've been doing my PSA back since 2016, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And it'd been 1.1, and then 2017 it was 1.0, and then for some reason they didn't do it in 2018, but in 2019 it was 2.7, and then 2020 it was 4.4, yeah. 4.5. So I'm looking at that going, if I had known that, that the trend would have alarmed me more.
Yeah.
And if we had been looking at that a little bit more. And then I go back, I've got I knew I had an uncle that had prostate cancer, and I bet it's been 15 years since he's had it. But he caught it early, and I had a chance to talk to him recently at a family reunion, and he said it was a Gleason 6. He had the surgery, and he's been good ever since.
Okay.
My grandfather had cancer, his father, and I'd always thought it was bone cancer, and he had melanomas, and I thought it had started as colon cancer. Come to find out, it had started as prostate cancer.
Okay.
And he was about 78, 79 then. And I ended up, I was in a time of my life where I'd gotten divorced and was kind of in between careers, and I ended up going to live with him for because he needed the help, and he had a big farm, and uh, which was great. But I I didn't know that he had had prostate cancer, and so knowing your family history,
Yeah.
my mom's telling me this, I'm going, and nobody ever told me. And then I'm finding out other members of the family knew. I'm like, that was probably something I needed to know. Um,
And you bring up a really good point, Ken. Sorry to interrupt. Is that it wasn't talked about, and like it's a generation that didn't share that type of thing, and we hear that time and time again. And it's another example of men isolating and just keeping their medical business to themselves, and which is totally opposite of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. So I took that to heart, because I was nailing every one of my cousins that was at this family reunion going,
Yeah.
what's your, because they're all hitting 50 now. I'm the oldest one. And I was like, what's your PSA?
What?
Get checked.
Yeah. How old are you now, Ken?
I'm 60 now.
You're 60 years old. So this started it started earlier than 59, but you were 59 when you was confirmed you had cancer.
Diagnosed, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how old was your uncle when he found out? You said 50?
My uncle would have been, he was probably in his 60s.
Oh, okay.
Maybe mid 60s or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things, my mom cried, oh, your uncle's got prostate cancer, and then he's going to be okay. A little while later, you didn't hear a lot about it, and he didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
So,
but there's so much about what you've talked about in the last 15, 20 minutes about why we're doing what we're doing, and why Tracy's vision and so many people who are becoming advocates are getting the word out there, is that if you had known more about PSA, had known more about what the prostate did, and I'm thinking back to all those numbers you've had since 2017, and even if somebody within your primary care physician, if they had actually looked at those numbers, they may have said to you 2 years ago, we should be doing something then, 3 years ago. And the point I'm getting at is that as a patient, if you are more aware and more involved in your care, you're probably going to push more sooner.
Right. You can look at 4.5 in a vacuum and go, well, it's a little over normal. There's some things that could cause that. But when you look at the fact that it was on an upward trend over a 3-year period, and then you've got a family history, there should be some alarm bells going off. And I just missed all that.
You and so many others. And so this past weekend, I was at a gathering with a bunch of cancer survivors, and we were talking an awful lot about the fact that we have to we have to be our own advocates. We have to be listening to our bodies as men. And if you were to ask a woman after the age of 20, I would say that they're aware of the things that they need to be looking for. And most men that I know, including myself at that time, I didn't even think about it. And if there was any kind of medical thing happening with me, I just ignored it. And I was guilty of that for the majority of my life. And I think a lot of men are. And so most people I talked to agreed with me about that. And so with the mission and what I'm hearing from you is getting the message out there so that men, when they're in their 50s and 60s, especially if there are some things that are going on, like you're having trouble urinating, or you're having, there's other things, or you read that your PSA's on the rise. We're trying to get the message out that people need to start being their own advocates and getting people to start testing them.
Right. And when I first started, Robert Jackson, Bo Jackson, was online, and he was facing, he was toward the end of his fight. Yeah. And I had kind of been through this with my grandfather. I was very close to him. Of course, I was the first grandchild, so I was the golden child, but he and I always had a really good, close relationship, and that was hard on me. And I may not have handled it well, but I kind of avoided those last few weeks, and because I just didn't want to see him like that. And it was Bo's warrior spirit, and just that I'm just going to embrace this and be like that. I said, you know what, I'm not going to just hide. I'm going to interact, and I'm not going to just do that with Bo, but I'm going to do that with the people around me. I'm not going to not talk about this. I've been not shy about sharing this with anybody. You can imagine a small community, a lot of people. I know a lot of people, and a lot of people know I have cancer. Um, and so it's given me a great opportunity to just have a lot of good one-on-one conversations with people. And now I'm thinking, okay, what can I do in my community that's kind of fulfilling this mission of what the Mohawk mission is?
Yes.
Because there is no local support group. You'd have to go to Nashville to find a support group, probably maybe in Clarksville, Tennessee. But so it's really given me a purpose of, so what do I do with all this that I'm dealing with, and how do I help bring something good out of it?
So do you have any other plans in place for that? I know this is a great first start here. We'll have this published in the next couple of weeks, but do you have any other ideas of things you'd like to do?
Well, I work for the bank I work for is Regions Bank. It's a large regional bank. We've got about 20,000 employees. So I reached out to, and we've got, one of those corporate home news pages that they post all the news on and what's going on that month and different weeks. And so I reached out to them about putting something on there for September being Prostate Cancer Awareness Month.
Yes.
And so we've got a whole wellness department, so they kind of put me in touch with them. So I don't know if we're going to get anything on there this month. This is also our Employee Appreciation Month, so there's a lot of stuff on there about that. But they are going to do a webinar for associates in conjunction with the University of Alabama Birmingham Hospital, and so they've asked me to share my story with them, and so I'm hoping that it'll be something that we can reach out to, a large number of people. I made the point of telling them, this doesn't just affect the 50-year-old plus guys that are working there. This affects everybody, because they've got uncles, fathers, husbands.
Yeah.
It affects everybody. And a lot of people I talked to had no idea of risk rates and the numbers involved with prostate cancer.
Yes, 100%. So you mentioned that you had been on a couple of other groups, and can you explain to me exactly how you found the PC Tribe? Was it something maybe Tracy had posted on one of those groups?
Yeah, it was through something he had posted on one of those groups, and as I just kind of found that they weren't really, and it wasn't that they were bad groups. It was just they weren't filling a need for me, and so I got around and checked it out and asked to join, and it didn't take long for me to say this is what I was looking for.
Okay.
And it's just the camaraderie, the support, the sharing of stories, and it's a good mix of, hey, I got these test results back, they were great. I got these test results back and they sucked. And just that there's support for whatever is going on in your fight with cancer. It's just been great, and you can ask for advice, and you'll get this is what my journey looks like, because it became evident quite quickly that we're all on a little bit different journey. It's just amazing how different paths this cancer takes.
It is, and that was one of the things I actually meant to mention earlier on, is that you're quite active in the page, and most recently, the month of August, we had and because it's not just about cancer, you're right, it's about the camaraderie, it's about the fellowship of everyone getting together to help each other out. And we did what's cooking, where we're encouraging people to, and you showed, I think you may have, I think Greg Brown had the record for the month, and it was his idea, but you were probably second place.
Well, I'm fortunate because my wife is a world-class cook.
Oh.
One of our sons is an executive chef at a retirement community down in Florida, and the other one has worked with award-winning chefs in Nashville and it would be a contest between him and his brother as to which one can cook better. But they're both amazing. But they learn from their mother, and she can just whip up these amazing things. And so it's not what I'm doing. I'm just fortunate to be married to a great cook.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just an example of the support that we are giving each other on the page. And I really appreciated your participation in that. So what's next?
Well, I've just had to learn to live with the side effects of the medicine. And that's, and we've all been through this probably and that's why it's that first year perspective of, and these guys talk about 5 years and 10 years. And I'm like, man, I'm just now kind of getting through my first year. And, but it's the things that I've had to do as far as dealing with the ED, dealing with the effects of the Lupron, and then you kind of put the Xtandi on top of it. I started a pretty serious exercise program the day after I quit. I got done with radiation. And that's made a huge difference in energy levels and kind of stopping the muscle loss and some of that from the Lupron. And I just took advantage of, if my company offered something I could use, I took advantage of every program they had. I started seeing a counselor just to have somebody just kind of sit down and talk through things with, because, I'd been thinking about when I wanted to retire. But now it's kind of like, well, what if I had to retire now? Mm-hmm. And then, this has been a big part of my life. I've been there 18 years. And so, how do you find a new kind of meaning for life?
Yeah.
And this is kind of helping me say, this can be one of the things that I can do. And so just kind of living that daily, and we all tell each other, go on living. Don't abandon your life. But we do have to kind of make some adjustments a lot of times. And so just kind of learning to make those adjustments and still enjoying life and getting as much out of it as possible. So
can you tell us a little bit about the symptoms, like the symptoms after radiation and after the medications that you were on?
So I was really fortunate, because I started the radiation, and my radiation oncologist was like, I'm going to prescribe you these for nausea, because we're getting up close to the duodenum in the bottom of the stomach, and you're probably going to be nauseous. And I never had any of that. So he was real happy about that. I really tolerated it really well the first 3 weeks, but the 4th and 5th week, with the radiation, there's a little diarrhea, you can have some difficulty urinating, some painful urination. It can cause some, more urgency around that. And I had some of that, but it wasn't unmanageable. And so I was able to kind of get through all that. And then with the Lupron and the Xtandi, they kind of have the same side effects, because the Lupron is cutting off your testosterone, and then the Xtandi is a testosterone blocker. So it kind of doubles down on a lot of the just the fatigue, which is one of the other big things of the radiation. And so, just combating that, and, I have to go to bed earlier and work out in the mornings. I kind of plan my day. I've had to kind of rearrange some of my work stuff, and just make sure I'm not overdoing it. I've got 6 acres, and, I've always been one to do a lot of stuff outside, and I've kind of had to say, this is my project for today, and kind of limit what I'm doing just so I'm not totally wiped out the next day.
Yeah.
And just making those kind of things. So it, my my wife would call me Pollyanna because I've generally been an optimistic, kind of happy person,
Yeah.
and that was one of the big things with the when I started. I was doing okay. It was a little bit of depression and with the Lupron, but when it started the Xtandi, I was just like, he would hit me, and I was just like, what is going on? Because it wasn't me, and I knew it wasn't me, but there wasn't a lot you could do about it. It was just come over you, and so that's why I started the counseling and talked to the doctor about what we could do about that. So, and they all felt that as I stayed on the Xtandi, a lot of that would kind of smooth out and get better, and it feels like it has. So, but
In addition,
it's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, in addition to the ED, did you have any issues with incontinence or anything like that?
Not really. They just had a little urgency. So, I hear the guys that have had the surgery and everything, and I just have not had those problems.
Okay. Hot flashes?
Oh, I got the hot flashes now. I tell you that.
I know it's one of the things we laugh about during the Zoom meetings is people are talking about, I'm getting a hot flash right now. So
yeah, my wife I'll fling the covers back and she'll try to kind of chuckle because she's already been through all that, and she'll say, now you know what I'm talking about. And so I work with 5 women.
okay.
And so we've got a mix of ages, so there's some that are laughing at me, and some are going, why are you cranking the air down? It's like, I'm the manager, I can turn the air down if I want to. Yeah, that's been, I've been able to deal with it. It hadn't been terrible, but it's like somebody just lights a match inside of you and you're sweating all of a sudden.
Well, I can honestly say that I wouldn't call it Pollyanna. I'd say your glass is always half full. You just have a great attitude, and I know that when you contacted me before, you want to talk about people who are like a year in and where they can be at. And I mean, think about where you were a year ago, the diagnosis you got, and here you are saying your last few PSA tests have been virtually undetectable. I mean, it's one of those messages that we want to get out there for people, is that, yeah, there's some stories that go the other way, but there's stories that go this way as well. And it's really good to have those out there for people to give them some hope. And that's what you're doing here.
Well, and that was one of the things, because that was one of the biggest things I had to kind of deal with was, and I think it took me probably 6 to 9 months to really come to terms with the fact that, hey, this is stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like a month after the diagnosis, and my wife's going, no, honey, it's stage 4. That means it's spread and it's not curable. And just kind of having to, I was in denial a little bit. And I think when you get that first diagnosis, it's a gut punch to hear that. And so that's been one of the biggest things to kind of wrap your mind around. And I think we talked about some of that in some of the incurable cancer podcast or Zoom meetings. And so it is good. So to hear some of the guys' stories of where they were when they started and how far they've come, it does, even if my story is not as amazing as some of those, but to hear John White and Darren Paget and some of the stories they tell, and it does give me hope.
Yeah.
And so, at 1 year, I'm thinking, I can do this.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And so for those that don't know, we have every second Tuesday, we do Zoom meetings for all the people that are on the page. And then Tracy Morgan has also established Zoom meetings for people who are stage 4. And I'm not stage 4, so I haven't been to those meetings, but that's just the type of thing that we're doing on the PC Tribe to bring men together, to share their stories. And I think it's really working.
Yeah, it's been great. It really has.
So, Any last words of wisdom before we end this?
Well, I don't know if I have any words of wisdom, but check your PSA and know your family history. It makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And be your own advocate. Make sure you learn as much. Check your medical records, go into the portals and check your labs and stay on top of the medical people. That's also really important.
Yeah, I've totally been blessed with a urologist that said, no, we're not doing surgery. We're sending you to the oncologist. And some oncologists said, no, we need a deeper level of scans. And, didn't show any jealousy about sending me to another hospital. And it's just I've been blessed in that regard.
And think about that this all happened during COVID-19, which is also incredible. And for you telling me how quickly things happened. So, and that actually brings me to another point. How was that because it was COVID during all of this, were you going to most of these sessions on your own? Did you have your wife with you?
I was fortunate that by this time, so the Tennessee response to COVID is quite a bit different than the Canadian response to COVID.
Yeah.
And so by this time they were letting one visitor in,
okay,
with me.
Okay.
And so she was able to go with me on all these. Of course, still wearing a mask and all that good stuff, but that's okay because by this time my immune system is not quite what it used to be. So
yeah. Well, very lucky then, as I know a lot of people, including myself, went through all this on our own in the hospital. I was diagnosed in 2020 and did it on my own. So I'm very happy that you had that opportunity because I think that helps a lot, having that's close support. Do you have any of your gear? I got my hat today.
No, I do not have any yet. That's one of my next things I've got to do is order me some gear. So
because that generates conversation. I even have the tattoo to try to get conversations started. So, but Ken, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for contacting me to share this story. It gives a lot of hope for people, and let's do this again, maybe in a year from now, and get an update and see where it's going.
All right. Well, I've been happy to share. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Well, that's a wrap, everyone. A special thank you to Ken McGhee for sharing his story today. If you'd like to share your story, please contact me through social media channels and we'll see if we can get you on the air. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.